so we are at the point now in this review course where we are going to go through 2 different constructed response questions. This is when you are going to have to write the essay. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about what you're going to have to do. All right, so the rubric is created to evaluate your response to the constructed response question, and it's based on the following criteria. Completion, the degree to which the candidate completes the assignment by responding to each specific task in the assignment. So here we're looking at you have got to make sure you respond to every single part. Application of content, the degree to which the candidate applies the relevant knowledge and skills to the response accurately and effectively. So here you're proving that you know what you're talking about. And then support, the degree to which the candidate supports the response with appropriate evidence, examples, and explanations based on the relevant content, knowledge, and skills. So here is where you are going to give your evidence and examples. You have a rubric to go off of as far as how you're going to get a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1. A B is, it's blank. There's nothing even there. All right, let's go to U. It's unscorable because it's unreadable. So it's written in a language other than English or does not even, like let's say you just typed your first name or something like that, unscorable. All right, so let's look at a 1. A 1 reflects little to no understanding. So you've only completed a few or part of the assignment. You have inaccurate, ineffective application, and little to no evidence. So we've got to make sure that we have evidence. All right, let's look at 2. The 2 response reflects a limited understanding of the relevant content, knowledge, and skills. All right, so let's look here now. We've got to make sure that we are hitting all of these, because if it's a limited understanding, then that means that only some or parts of the assignment have been completed. It's only partially accurate, and there's only limited evidence. All right, so we're looking at these words here, pulling this out to make sure we know what we've got to do to pass. Let's look at the next one. A 3 is a general understanding. So most or all of the parts are there, except it's only generally accurate, and there's sufficient evidence, but only general sound explanations. Let's look at a 4 though. This is what you're going to want to get. With a 4, there is thorough understanding. It has been fully addressed, every part of the assignment. There is accurate and highly effective application, and then strong, relevant evidence with well-reasoned explanations. So I'm going to go over here to another color, and we're going to pull out specific words. So in 4, let's look at the word thorough, strong, relevant, well-reasoned. Let's look at 3, general, part, general, general. Let's look at 2, limited, some, partial, limited. Let's look at 1, little to no, few, inaccurate, little to no. All right, so we want to make sure we are up in here, or at least up in here. So that's what we are shooting for, and so we want to make sure that we are thorough. That's going to be our key going forward. This assignment focuses on a 2nd grade student. So now we're going to go into an example. This assignment focuses on a 2nd grade student named Haley, who is 7 years old. Her primary language is English. The assessment data and the exhibits were collected during the first 6 weeks of the school year. The level of each assessment was selected based on Haley's previous assessment results. Using your knowledge of reading pedagogy and the developmental progression of foundational reading skills and reading comprehension as described in the TExES for English language arts and reading, analyze the information provided and write a response of approximately 400 to 600 words in which you, all right, so before we even move on though, we're going to pull out a couple things. Look, we need to make sure we have approximately 400 to 600 words. We've got to make sure we hit the TExES. So we've got to make sure that we're incorporating that in our answer. We are going to be talking about foundational reading skills, comprehension, and we're looking at through the lens of a second grade student. All right, so now let's look at her evidence, the evidence they're showing us, an example of her work. And we are looking at this through the lens of a second grade student. All right, let's look at what else they're telling us to do. So this is our assignment. This is your constructed response. We are going to have to identify a significant need that the student demonstrates related to a foundational skill. So phonemic awareness, phonics, high frequency words, something like that. We're going to have to cite specific evidence from the exhibit. So they're going to give us evidence of her work. We're going to have to cite it. All right. Then we're going to describe an appropriate effective instructional strategy or activity. So then we're going to say, if we were her teacher, this is something that would address her need. We're going to make sure we are looking at grade level standards. Then we're going to identify a significant need the student demonstrates related to comprehension. So vocabulary knowledge, knowledge of sentence and grammatical structures, something like that. Again, citing evidence from the exhibits, from what they're showing us, her data. Then we're going to describe an effective instructional strategy or activity for that need. Again, looking at grade level standards. Then finally, the last part of your essay is you are going to explain why each of the instructional strategies or activities you describe would be effective in addressing the needs you identified and in helping the student achieve grade level reading standards as described in TExES. So we're going to explain our answers and make sure we hit the TExES. For this assessment, the teacher met with individual students and asked them to read aloud from several word lists of increasing complexity. As the student read each word, the teacher made a record of the student's performance by using check marks to indicate words that the student read accurately and automatically, and using simplified phonetic transcription to record any errors. This assessment was timed, and the student had to respond accurately within 3 seconds. Below are some of the words in the assessment, followed by the teacher's record for Haley. So this is the first assessment Haley took. All right, so we're looking at grade level, right? That said said that she was in second grade, so grade level list. And she got everything correct except here, here, and here. She said Earl instead of early, quite instead of quite, quietly, and careful instead of carefully. All right, so if we're looking at the evidence here, something we can pull out is she is missing ending sounds when it is a multisyllabic word, right? So let's make some notes. So missing ending sounds, it's only when it's multisyllabic. And then also, interestingly enough, it's always when it ends in Y. All right, so a few things to think about. Let's keep going. For this assessment, the teacher met with individual students and asked them to read aloud a short passage. The teacher read aloud the title of the passage to Haley before prompting her to begin reading. The title of the passage is Dogs. All right, so we have a running record here. It says, after reading this text, the teacher asked her the following questions, and here are her answers. All right, well, before we look at that, let's go ahead and start pulling out some of her miscues. Okay, I'm seeing a trend here. We have biggest instead of cuddliest, little instead of small, scary instead of growly, a couple self-corrections. Okay, let's look over here at the dialogue. The teacher said, who was this story about? And the student said, a dog, which was correct. Then the teacher asked, how did his mom describe him? And Haley said, he's the biggest. Correct answer would have been cuddliest. And we can see that right here, that she read biggest instead of cuddliest. Question, how did his dad describe him? Little. The correct answer would have been small. and that was another one of her errors. She ended up self-correcting for accuracy when reading, but then when she went back to answer it, she reverted back to her error. All right, so scary instead of growly. They are both adjectives, but also end in Y. Interesting. All right. And kind of the same. I can see the similarity there. If you're growly, it's kind of scary. Little instead of small. Okay. Same thing, similar words, but they don't look alike, but they mean the same thing. And then same with biggest and cuddliest. Maybe she was looking at the picture and thought that it was showing big, but it was really the word was cuddlier. So she's not looking at the first letter in the word. That's for sure. All right, let's keep going. Exhibit 3, Haley's teacher met with individual students to administer assessments in letter naming fluency, Phonemic-Segmentation fluency, and nonsense word fluency, decoding words that are not real. Haley's scores are shown below, along with a brief description of each assessment and notes from the teacher. All right, so in letter naming fluency, she got a 50, where she should be at 55 or higher. A little bit higher than where she needs to be in phoneme segmentation. Nonsense words, she was at an 8 and should be at least a 10. All right. Let's see here. She identified these incorrectly once and correctly once. Okay, so again, she's self-correcting a little here. That's important to note. Let's make a note of that so we remember. She's doing some self-correcting. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and move on and see what we can put together. With Exhibit 4, we can also look at a writing sample. My test. I had a test on Friday. The test was for spelling. I finished quickly. I got a pretty sticker. All right, well, interesting enough, so we're just kind of finding trends here. For Friday, look at what letter she's missing, that ending Y. Same with quickly and pretty. And then she's missing an ending sound here. Stick missing the SH for finished. Okay. All right, so I think we've got a good idea of where her deficiencies are. All right, let's look at what we're going to have to do. The first thing is it said we were going to identify a significant need related to a foundational skill. All right, so that's going to be the first thing we hit when we go to write our essay. Next, we're going to have to describe an effective instructional strategy for that. We're thinking about second grade here. Then we're going to identify a significant need with comprehension. All right, we talked about that. And then what's next? We're going to have to talk about an effective strategy for second grade. And then we're going to have to make sure we explain why our strategies would be effective and make sure we talk about TExES. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this exemplar essay and see what we've got. After reviewing the data from the word list assessment, I can see that Haley's most significant deficiency is ending sounds in multisyllabic words. These are also identified as words ending in the letter Y. This is a subset of the foundational skill of phonics as it applies to reading a written text. I would suggest that Haley use the intervention strategy of a phonics game called Syllable Closed Sort. In this game, she would use a pocket chart already labeled with columns 1, 2, 3, and 4. Haley would choose a card with a word on it, read the word aloud, then identify it as a 1, 2, or 3, or 4 syllable word. She would then sort the card by placing it in the pocket chart under the correctly numbered column. Once Haley is finished with reading and sorting the cards, she would write them on a sheet of paper also labeled with columns 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once she has written all the words from the pocket chart, she would practice reading them as word lists, and then the teacher would read them to the teacher. She could also practice reading them to a partner to increase fluency so that she categorizes the multisyllabic words as such. According to her running record, I can see that her most significant deficiency in reading comprehension are miscues with meaning. I use the miscue analysis strategy of meaning, syntax, visual to identify her errors as being those which align with contextual meaning, which tells me that Haley is using tools to find meaning, but not word attack skills to read with accuracy. I would have Haley practice with reading accuracy by practicing with an activity called sentence pantomime. I would have sentences written on strips of paper and have her read them, then act them out. One example would be pat your head, while another is pat your hand. Haley would have to read for accuracy to follow the directions correctly and act the sentences out. This would allow her to practice a strategy for reading for meaning. The strategy I've chosen for Haley to practice phonics directly aligns with the TExES second grade foundational phonics standard of applying phonetic knowledge of final stable syllables. The comprehension standard aligned with her comprehension deficit is being able to evaluate details to determine key ideas in a text. Both of these standards also align with the third grade readiness based on third grade TExES. If after reassessing, Haley has made sufficient growth in both comprehension and phonics to score proficient in both a second grade level text with accuracy and reading comprehension, I would begin assessing her with other foundational and comprehension skills to determine another area of needed improvement. If after reassessing Haley does not show proficient growth in reading comprehension and ending sounds and multisyllabic words, I would implement more instructional strategies before assessing again. All right, so let's dig out part of this. So we have identified that her biggest foundational skill need was phonics, and that is specifically ending sounds and multisyllabic words, specifically ending in the letter Y. All right, so we hit number 1. Number 2, we had to come up with a strategy. So they wrote that the intervention strategy of a phonics game closed syllable sort was going to be used. They described the activity and said the purpose, that she would be practicing reading them to a partner to increase fluency of the multisyllabic words. So that was 2. Number 3, according to her running record, all right, so we are also hitting that evidence, right? We're talking about running record. We're talking about her errors on the word list. In comprehension, that was the next thing we had to do. Her miscues are with meaning. So she is not using word attack skills to read with accuracy. She is using other tools like looking at a picture or something to find out what makes sense. But she's not looking at that first letter to make sure it's the right word. Then the activity, we had to have an activity for that, would be sentence pantomime. This would allow her to practice a strategy of reading for meaning. And then the last thing we had to do was make sure we hit those TExES and explain why we're doing what we're doing. All right, so right here we talk about that the TExES that we're going to hit are foundational phonics standards for applying phonetic knowledge of final syllables, and then also able to evaluate details and determine key ideas in a text. And then we talk about here explaining why we're going to do what we're going to do, and then also if it works, after reassessing her, if it works, we're going to find another area of needed improvement. If it doesn't work, then we are going to implement more instructional strategies. All right, so everything was hit, and we can definitely say this was thorough.